Christmas Eve, 2002. While most of America was wrapping gifts and gathering around the table, a young woman vanished. She was 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, radiantly beautiful. The kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, who planted vegetables in her garden, who lit up every room she walked into. Her name was Laci Peterson, and within 4 months, her body, and the body of her unborn son, would wash ashore on the banks of San Francisco Bay, just miles from where her husband claimed he had been fishing. What followed would become one of the most devastating, most debated, and most controversial murder cases in American history. And over 20 years later, it is still not over. To understand this story, you have to understand who Laci Peterson was. Born Laci Denise Rocha in Modesto, California in 1975, Laci grew up with a warmth that people noticed immediately. Her mother, Sharon, described her as the kind of child who made friends the moment she walked into a room. She was energetic, optimistic, and deeply family-oriented. She studied ornamental horticulture at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, a passion that would follow her throughout her short life, showing up in the garden of every home she ever lived in. It was at Cal Poly in 1994 that she met Scott Peterson. Scott was handsome, confident. He had the easy charm of someone who never seemed to struggle. He was working as a waiter when their paths first crossed, and by most accounts, Laci was immediately drawn to him. They began dating in 1995, and the relationship quickly became serious. They married in August 1997. A beautiful ceremony, photos of which would eventually be replayed on every television in America. The couple settled in Modesto, buying a modest home at 523 Covina Avenue. Scott worked as a fertilizer salesman for a company called Trade Corp. Laci pursued her love of cooking and homemaking and worked part-time as a substitute teacher. They were, by all outward appearances, the perfect couple. Young, attractive, successful, and now expecting their first child. They had already chosen a name for their son, Connor. Laci's family adored Scott. Her mother, Sharon, welcomed him like a son. Friends described their home as warm, alive, full of laughter. But behind the picture-perfect exterior, cracks were already forming. Because while Laci was decorating the nursery for baby Connor, her husband had begun a secret double life. In November 2002, just weeks before Laci would disappear, Scott Peterson had begun a romantic relationship with a woman named Amber Frey. Amber was a massage therapist from Fresno. She was single, successful, and had no idea that the charming man who had swept her off her feet was married. Because Scott Peterson had told her he was not. He told Amber Frey he had lost his wife, that he was a widower, that he would be spending the upcoming Christmas holiday alone for the first time. The only problem? Laci Peterson was still very much alive. At least, she was, for a few more weeks. December 24th, 2002, Christmas Eve. Laci Peterson was 8 months pregnant. Her due date was just weeks away. By all accounts, she was glowing, excited, nesting, preparing for the arrival of the son she had dreamed about. That morning, Scott claimed he loaded his truck with fishing gear and headed for the Berkeley Marina, approximately 90 miles from their home in Modesto, to take his newly purchased 14-foot aluminum boat out onto San Francisco Bay. He said it was a solo fishing trip, despite the bitter cold and the fact that the marina was nearly 2 hours away. He said he left Laci at home around 9:30 in the morning. He said she was watching the news, that her dog, a golden retriever mix named Mackenzie, was inside the house. He said everything was normal. When Scott returned home that afternoon, Laci was gone. At first, he made no immediate calls to police. He called Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, first. It was Sharon who contacted the Modesto Police Department. It was Sharon who began making frantic calls to friends and family. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers poured into the streets of Modesto, searching parks, neighborhoods, and fields. Laci's family held a press conference. Flyers with her smiling face were distributed across California. A $500,000 reward was offered for information. Scott Peterson stood in front of cameras and made appeals to the public. And investigators watched. They watched very, very carefully, because something was wrong. From the very first night, Modesto Police Detective Alan Brocchini, who interviewed Scott the morning after Lacey's disappearance, noticed inconsistencies. The timeline didn't quite add up. The demeanor didn't match. And then there was the fishing trip itself. Scott Peterson had bought that boat just weeks earlier. He had taken it out only once before. He had told no one about this Christmas Eve fishing excursion. Police began quietly building a picture of who Scott Peterson really was, and what they found would change everything. Within days of Lacey's disappearance, police learned about Amber Frey. When detectives approached her, Amber didn't hesitate. She came forward on her own. She had seen news coverage of the missing pregnant woman and recognized something horrifying. The husband, Scott Peterson, was the same man she had been dating. The same man who had told her he was a widower. The same man who had said he would be spending Christmas alone. Amber Frey agreed to cooperate with investigators. She agreed to record her phone calls with Scott. And what was recorded on those phone calls would become some of the most chilling audio evidence in American true crime history. Because while his pregnant wife was missing, Scott Peterson was calling his girlfriend and reading her love poetry. In the weeks that followed Lacey's disappearance, Modesto police quietly made Scott Peterson their prime suspect. But proving it was another matter entirely. There was no direct physical evidence, no murder weapon, no witnesses who saw anything at the Peterson home on Christmas Eve. The case, investigators knew, would be difficult. What they had was a pattern. First, there was the affair. Scott had been lying to both Lacey and Amber simultaneously. He had told Amber he was a widower before Lacey went missing, a detail that prosecutors would later argue was no accident. It suggested, they said, that he was already planning what was to come. Second, there was the fishing trip itself. Scott had purchased the boat with cash, quietly, just weeks earlier. He had told almost no one about it. He had driven nearly 90 miles on Christmas Eve morning, passing dozens of closer lakes and waterways to fish alone at a marina he barely knew. And that marina sat on the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay, the very same body of water where Lassie and Connor's remains would later be found. Third, investigators noted Scott's behavior in the weeks after Lacey vanished. While families of missing persons typically show visible, deteriorating anguish, Scott Peterson appeared composed. He was spotted at a golf course. He visited Amber Frey. He did not join search parties. He hired attorney Mark Geragos, a high-profile criminal defense lawyer, before charges were ever filed. And the wire-tapped phone calls with Amber Frey painted a damning portrait. In those calls, Scott told Amber he didn't want children, that he had considered getting a vasectomy, that he wanted freedom. He also told Amber, in a call made after Lassie was already missing, that he was in Paris watching the New Year's Eve celebrations from the Eiffel Tower. He was, in reality, in Modesto, standing in front of news cameras at a vigil for his missing wife. Then came April 13th, 2003. A dog walker on the Richmond shoreline, just across the bay from the Berkeley Marina where Scott said he had gone fishing, discovered something partially buried in the rocks. It was the remains of a male fetus. The following day, a partial female torso washed ashore about a mile away at Point Isabel. Both bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition. A forensic pathologist would later testify that the manner in which the remains surfaced was consistent with bodies that had been weighted down and submerged for months, eventually breaking loose from the bay floor. DNA confirmed what detectives already feared. The woman was Lacey Peterson. The baby was Connor. They had been found less than 2 miles from where Scott claimed he had been fishing on Christmas Eve. 4 days later, on April 18th, 2003, detectives caught up with Scott Peterson at a golf course in San Diego, just miles from the Mexican border. He had dyed his hair blonde. He was carrying $15,000 in cash. He had his brother's ID, He had multiple cell phones. He was arrested on 2 counts of capital murder. Scott Peterson pleaded not guilty. He would maintain that plea for the next 22 years. The trial of Scott Peterson began on June 1st, 2004, and it was unlike anything the American legal system had seen in years. The case had already become a media firestorm. Lacey's disappearance had been covered relentlessly for months. The discovery of the bodies, the affair, the arrest. By the time Scott Peterson walked into a courtroom, millions of Americans had already made up their minds. Because of massive pretrial publicity, the trial was moved from Modesto to Redwood City in San Mateo County. Judge Alfred DeLucchi presided. The prosecution, led by Rick DiStasso, faced a daunting challenge. Their case was almost entirely circumstantial. There was no murder weapon, no confession, no definitive cause of death. What they had was a story, and they told it powerfully. Their argument was straightforward. Scott Peterson had wanted out. The pregnancy was an unwanted complication. The affair with Amber Frey had given him a glimpse of the life he preferred. And so, prosecutors argued, on Christmas Eve morning, before leaving for the fishing trip, Scott strangled his wife, placed her body in his boat, and dumped her into San Francisco Bay, weighted down to keep her submerged. The proximity of the bodies to his fishing location, they argued, was no coincidence. It was the only explanation that fit. The anchor of the prosecution's case was Amber Frey. When Amber took the stand in August 2004, the courtroom was electric. She was composed, credible, and devastating. She described the relationship in detail. She played the recorded phone calls, calls in which Scott had lied compulsively, emotionally manipulated her, and expressed zero concern about finding his missing wife. In one call, made on New Year's Eve, Scott told Amber he was watching fireworks in Paris. A moment later, television cameras outside a Modesto vigil captured him, live, standing with Lacey's family. The defense, led by the formidable Mark Garagos, pushed back hard. Garagos argued that the evidence was circumstantial at best, that Scott was being convicted not because of proof, but because of public hatred. He pointed to alternative theories, specifically a burglary that had occurred across the street from the Peterson home on or around the same time Lacey disappeared. 2 men, Stephen Todd and Donald Pierce, had been arrested for that burglary. Garagos argued that Lotzi may have encountered them, that she had been abducted, that the real killers were out there. It wasn't enough. Juror number 7 would later say the jury was swayed heavily by Scott's behavior, his coldness, his composure, his inability or aim or unwillingness to show the kind of grief that made sense for a man whose pregnant wife had just been murdered. He was just so calm, she recalled. And that was one of the things that bothered us most. On November 12, 2004, after 7 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Lacey Peterson and second-degree murder in the death of their unborn son, Connor. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted. People cheered. They hugged strangers. They wept. Lacey's mother, Sharon Rocha, released a statement. Lacey and Connor, you will forever be in our hearts. On March 16, 2005, Judge DeLucchi sentenced Scott Peterson to death by lethal injection. As he was led from the courtroom, juror Rochelle Nice called out, "San Quentin is your new home." Most people assumed the Scott Peterson case was closed. It wasn't. In August 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Scott Peterson's death sentence, citing errors in jury selection. He was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2021. And then, in early 2024, something happened that sent shockwaves through the legal world. The Los Angeles Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to exonerating wrongfully convicted individuals, announced that it was taking on Scott Peterson's case. They said they had found evidence that had never been presented to the jury. At the center of this new theory was the burglary across the street from the Peterson home. The same burglary the defense had raised at trial, but been unable to prove was connected to Lacey's disappearance. Here is what the Innocence Project claims they have now discovered. The burglary may have occurred on Christmas Eve, the very day Lacey vanished, and not 2 days later, as the jury was told at trial. A neighbor named Diane Jackson has come forward to say that on the morning of December 24th, she saw 3 people standing in front of the home across the street with a van. She says she saw what she believed was a pregnant woman confronting those men, and the van connected to the burglary was later found burned at a nearby airfield. Investigators found a bloody mattress inside it. The blood tested positive for male DNA. No person has been identified. The Innocence Project wants further DNA testing on that evidence. Their attorneys argue that if the blood in the van can be matched, it could fundamentally change the case. Former prosecutor Stephen Clark, who attended parts of Peterson's original trial, called the Innocence Project's filing a bombshell piece of litigation. And in August 2024, Scott Peterson broke his more than 2-decade silence. In the Peacock docuseries, Face to Face with Scott Peterson, the first interview he had given since before his conviction, Scott spoke from prison about what he believes happened that Christmas Eve morning. "There was a burglary across the street from our home," he said. "There were a lot of people in that burglary, and I believe that Lacey went over there to see what was going on. And that's when she was taken. It was the evidence they decided to ignore and to go with the theory. I wasn't the last one to see Lacey that day. There are so many credible witnesses who saw her walking." He also admitted to the affair with Amber Frey, calling himself an a-hole, but insisted it had nothing to do with Lacey's death. The docuseries was controversial. Critics argued that giving a convicted killer a platform disrespected Lacey's memory. Supporters argued that if there was any chance an innocent man was in prison, the conversation had to happen. Lacey's mother, Sharon Rocha, refused to participate in the docuseries. In a statement at a 2024 court hearing, she said, "I believe this is not about proving his innocence, but instead about his relentless pursuit to be freed from prison." Sharon Rocha has never wavered. She has never doubted what the jury found. She believes the man who murdered her daughter sits behind bars, exactly where he belongs. And there are tens of millions of people who agree with her. Here is where the case stands today. The Los Angeles Innocence Project continues to work on Scott Peterson's behalf. Court filings are active. New DNA testing has been requested. A judge is expected to rule on whether additional evidence can be reviewed and tested. 2 documentaries were released in 2024. One on Netflix, titled American Murder, Lacey Peterson, which tells the story from the perspective of Lacey's family and friends. One on Peacock, which gives Scott Peterson the chance to speak. The American public remains sharply divided. On one side, a man convicted by a jury of his peers on evidence that, circumstantial or not, pointed unmistakably in his direction. A man who lied to his mistress, who showed no emotion, who was found fleeing toward Mexico with dyed hair and a pile of cash, whose boat was found in the same body of water where his wife and son's remains appeared. On the other side, a legal system that admits the case had no murder weapon, no forensic evidence placing Scott at the scene of a crime, no established time or cause of death, a jury that admitted they were swayed by demeanor, not data, and now, the possibility that a burning van, a bloody mattress, and an unidentified witness may have held the answer all along. The truth is, we may never know with certainty exactly what happened in that house on Covina Avenue on Christmas Eve 2002. What we do know is this. Lacey Peterson was a 27-year-old woman who loved her family, her garden, and her unborn son. Connor Peterson never got to take his first breath. And somewhere between a fishing boat, a burning van, and 20 years of unanswered questions, justice has not finished its work. Whether you believe Scott Peterson is guilty, or whether the new evidence gives you pause, one thing is undeniable. Lacey Peterson deserved better. She deserved to hold her son. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to have the truth told, completely and without compromise. This case isn't just about Scott Peterson. It isn't about documentaries or appeals or legal strategies. It's about a young woman with a warm smile and a vegetable garden and a name she had already picked for her baby boy. It's about Lacey, and until the questions are answered, her story isn't over. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Do you think Scott Peterson is guilty? Do the new developments change anything for you? Like and subscribe if you're new here. We cover true crime stories like this every single week, and I promise you, we never take them lightly. This is more than entertainment. These are real people, real families, real grief.